Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for Lifetime's webinar for adoptive parents. Tonight's webinar is a special fun topic. We thought we'd put a little twist on it about what not to do in adoption today. So we are going to fill you in on all the details. Tonight's webinar has gotten a great response in signups, so we know that this is something everyone is interested in, and we appreciate you joining us. Just to cover a little bit of housekeeping, if you have not yet applied with Lifetime Adoption, there is no obligation in filling out our application on our website. It is a free application online. You can find the application by going to lifetimeadoption.com/apply. That's lifetimeadoption.com/apply, A-P-P-L-Y. If you have questions and you're not sure who your coordinator is, or maybe you don't have a coordinator yet, just reach out. You can call 1-800-923-6784. You can email us, adopt@lifetimeadoption.com. That's adopt, A-D-O-P-T, at lifetimeadoption.com. And of course, make sure you are linked up with us on Facebook. Like our page, follow us so that you can stay up to date on the conversations happening on Facebook at facebook.com/open.adoption. My name is Kim King, and I'm one of the adoptive family coordinators here at Lifetime Adoption. My co-host this evening is Heather Featherston, Lifetime's director, and our organizer for this evening is Libby Dennis. So thank you, ladies, for being here, and welcome to all of our families joining us on the line.
Thank you, Kim.
So tonight we wanted to fill in some details about what not to do. So often we focus on what to do in adoption. There are many opportunities for hiccups along the way, and hopefully we can spend the next hour or so just filling in some things of what not to do in your adoption, things to be conscious of. How would you preface the topic tonight, Heather, about what not to do in your adoption?
Well, you know, sometimes we put so much focus on the checklists and the things we need to do. And then, you know, we kind of go into the waiting phase. And not that we forget what we learned, but it's not relevant on a day-to-day basis. And we can't stay at that heightened level of anticipation. So that when you have a situation presented to you, or even when you're waiting in the situation, or any time in the adoption process, sometimes we might forget about some of the things we learned. Maybe if you're with a different adoption professional, you didn't learn those things at all. Maybe you overlooked them, you were focused on a different area, those types of things. So you might have missed something, or forgot something, or overlooked something. In other cases, it's just, hey, you know, the reality is most families who are adopting have never adopted before. So I don't think there should be any expectation that you already know all the material covered tonight, because if you haven't adopted before, many of these things may seem new, they may seem like common sense, but they are all stemming from our years of experience working with adoptive parents and birth mothers. And that's really key, because all of the situations and instances we're going to talk about tonight, we're going to share some stories too, but all of them we've experienced. And that's why we really want to be sure that you're prepared and you're armed with accurate information of what not to do, so that you can focus on, you know, doing the right thing to really ensure a safe and successful adoption.
And when it comes to one of the first things on our slideshow tonight, your behavior, words, and expectations, I would just say an overall theme is to have awareness of your behavior, word choices, and your expectations. What should people not do when it comes to these areas that we really can control our behavior, our words, and our expectations?
Yeah. I think really staying positive and not complaining is a big one. You know, a lot of times when we've come to adoption, it's because we were unable to have a biological child, or maybe we you know, always, you know, experienced miscarriage or some type of loss. You know, I like to remind families to strike the words, I deserve to be a parent, from their vocabulary, because you don't want to, first off, you don't want to sound desperate to a birth mother. But
Mm.
but also, you know, it's there's a lot of people that do not have the opportunity to become parents. So you want to be sure you have a good outlet for venting when you have stress, when you have emotion. You know, have a good circle of friends, maybe someone at your church, a family member, your spouse. If you need to seek outside counseling, sometimes, you know, families may need to consider that during their adoption wait. Be sure you're getting enough sleep and exercise, you know, taking care of yourself so you're going to be the best parent you can be. But, you know, have an appropriate outlet so that you can vent when you feel emotional and need to vent. But really what you want to do is stay positive through this journey, because your adoption is going to be a reflection of your attitude through it. And we've seen,
Mm.
you know, many families have very similar adoption journeys. The only difference was their attitude. And one may have come out awful, one may have come out saying that's the best thing that ever could have happened. It is, your attitude really affects so much in your adoption journey. Similarly, you don't ever want to complain, that may be too strong of a word, but complain to a potential birth mother about maybe a previous adoption loss, maybe about your you know, not being able to biologically conceive. Definitely you don't want to complain about the adoption process. And if you are using the same professional, you definitely don't want to complain about your adoption professional, whether it's your agency, your attorney, your facilitator, whoever you're using. You know, again, you need to stay positive. Um, and you want to really try to be discerning about whether something would help to vent to your professional or whether it's outside of their control. You know, your adoption
Mhm.
professional is here to help um, in a productive way toward completing an adoption. But this, by the same token, when you're waiting to be chosen by a birth mother, which is the case in most domestic adoptions today, you know, there are some things that are out of their control. You know, I was talking to a family the other day who had shared, they weren't working with Lifetime, they were working with someone else, and they had shared with their family that they were presented to a birth mother that was kind of a special situation, and they weren't chosen, and their family member they were sharing this with, in a real positive way, said, well, what's wrong with you? Why didn't they choose you? They should have. And she's like, wow, okay, I'm not sharing this stuff with you again in the future, because, you know, she was sharing it as a real positive thing, and her family member turned it around in a way that she actually felt bad she wasn't chosen. And so,
Mm.
you know, you want to be sure that if you're sharing those things, you're getting positive feedback. You don't want, you know, you don't want to have a you know, a gang up on some aspect of your adoption.
That's
Um,
right. I mean, the fact is you are adopting. The fact is, if you're following all of the instructions from your adoption professional, it's now out of your hands. So someone's negative comments back to you, you can't do anything about that. You're already doing everything in your power to be able to adopt successfully. You're already on this track. I would like to think there's no throwing in the towel. It's just a matter of time before your adoption takes place, as long as you're continuing to follow the steps that are necessary, of course. And you can choose who you surround yourself with when it comes to your support network, and you can filter what you share with certain individuals and be sure to ask them to keep the information private, of course.
right.
Another thing, if you really don't have very many people you're close to, or maybe you're a little more introverted, journaling. We've gotten really lazy lately about journaling our personal thoughts, because everything, we tap it out, we touch the screen, things happen. But journaling longhand can be very helpful, just to get it off your chest, just to get it out there, just to be able to vent even though it's not to another person. And obviously prayer can be
Mhm.
a great way to get things, to get worries off of your chest, because your worry or concern isn't going to be effective. You know, you just need to give that to the Lord, of course.
Right. You know, and we mentioned it a minute ago, Kim, about sounding desperate, using desperate language. You know,
Mm.
um, one of those things, you want to be sure your profile doesn't have that. You also want to be sure your direct communication doesn't have that. One of the things you don't want is you don't want to set up auto replies to any email account that has to do with your adoption. We've seen this before where people have set up an auto reply because, you know, it's set up for birth mothers to contact them, and then they get an automatic reply right back that is, you know, it's pre-programmed. Hi, you know, I'm thinking about you. Well, no, you're not. It's a pre-programmed response that I got as soon as you sent. I mean, so you really want to be sure that you don't kind of use that desperate language there. And also, you want to avoid, this is really important, avoid wording that sounds like your happiness depends on someone else's adoption decision. Basically, you know, my life won't be full until I have a child. Because, you know, that can really put a lot of pressure on someone. You want to be a whole person before you adopt. You don't want to, I mean, I understand that you may feel like your life and your family is not finished, it is not complete, but you also have to go into it not putting that weight, that pressure on someone else. And similarly, in a marriage, you can't put that pressure on your spouse as well. Like, you have to come into adoption as a whole person. And a birth mother shouldn't have to handle the pressure of completing your life stream. I mean, that's not why she's choosing adoption, is to complete your life stream. So, so that's kind of the desperate language. The next thing you see up on your screen is avoiding assumptions. And one of the ways we see that now and then has to do with humor. Sometimes we, especially when we're stressed or emotional or uncomfortable, we might use humor or jokes that they may seem funny, and you may even think, yeah, if I were in her shoes, it might seem funny. Well, you're not in her shoes. You know, a couple examples we've seen. You know, I'm just reading these off of examples we've pulled. This is a photo of a couple wanted. One tummy mama to fill our house with the pitter-patter of little feet. Empty arms waiting for your baby. You know, you don't want to make light of her decision, because this is a huge sacrifice. You also don't want to assume she's chosen you or she's chosen adoption until, you know, you have confirmation for you. She says, I'd like to place my baby with you. You know, we're on this journey together, however she words it. You also don't, if you're not hearing that, you don't want to keep asking, are you sure? Are you sure? You know, how sure are you? You know, that'll drive somebody nuts. You also don't want to assume that this decision is a negative one for her. You know, you don't want to say, I know this must be a terrible decision for you to make. Or something like, I imagine you've been through something awful to have to choose adoption. You know, good mothers choose adoption. Mothers who love their children choose adoption. That's not to say that mothers who really don't care have not chosen adoption in the past, but you need to go into this with the assumption that she is choosing adoption, and, you know, that's awesome, and she's making a positive decision at a personal cost for the sake of her child. Again, not for you. She's doing it for her child, and so you don't need to acknowledge a negative situation that she may not be feeling. Similarly, don't assume anything about her situation or her. You know, a lot of people, when they think about adoption, they think about a 16-year-old who made a mistake with her boyfriend. That's not who's placing for adoption today. Similarly, they're not, you know, heroin addicts who live on the street. Do those two descriptions make adoption plans? Sure they do, but the typical birth mother today does not fit into either of those categories. Not all birth mothers are young or single or homeless or battered or dropouts or drug users. In fact, I just spoke with a birth mother the other night who called us. She's 48 years old. She didn't expect to be pregnant at 48, and she's pregnant with twins. And so, you know, you never know. I also like to think that any of us could be in that situation with just a few different situations or a few different circumstances. It's not, you know, it's someone you've met, it's someone you know. It is not someone that maybe you've seen portrayed in movies, because adoption is typically not portrayed real positively in movies and on TV. But you have to remember they're just regular women who are trying to make the best decision for her child.
Sometimes I've heard the judgment of reasons why a birth mom is choosing. This judgment usually comes from families who are new to adoption and don't realize, that for most women this is a huge sacrifice that they're making, that it is hard on them for most women, but that they judge and say, well, she must not care about this baby. She doesn't want this baby anyway.
Right. Right.
So that's not necessarily true at all.
Not at all. In fact, we've had situations we've worked with where something has happened, say at the hospital, or even before she's delivered, that has really kind of turned the birth mother off to the family she chose, and she decided, you know what, I'm just going to parent because it's broken trust. And maybe she felt judged, maybe they said something, but that's one of those things that you want to tread very lightly. Birth mothers choose adoption, again, because they care about their child. In terms of judging, you really want to be sure that you're not passing judgment on her baby based on her situation or the circumstances of her lifestyle. Many years ago, before tattoos were as popular as they are now, I remember Marty telling a story about a family who passed on a birth mother because she had a tattoo. That was not a child they wanted based on her mother's choice to have a tattoo. We've had families pass on birth mothers because they didn't like the tone in their voice when they chatted. It's really important that you don't pass judgment on her choices or how she lives. If you feel in your heart this isn't the baby for you, by all means say no, but you need to understand these women are not coming from perfect situations, or else they would not be considering adoption. They would not be considering you. So it's really important that you keep in mind you're not adopting her. She wants you to adopt her baby. But really, birth mothers are very similar to adoptive parents. Often, once the adoption is complete, you see a different side of them. You see them more stable, more relaxed. You see them happier. And sometimes if a birth mother seems difficult to get along with, it's a good reminder you can talk to your adoption professional about how to communicate and keep the adoption moving forward. I know recently we had a birth mother who, the staff, they started making a list because this girl wanted somebody to come over and mow her lawn and do her laundry. And we really had to set up some boundaries for her to explain, okay, this is where we can help you. We can't mow your lawn. But she was very, very difficult to work with and wanted things that were not only unreasonable, but they weren't feasible. It just was, like I say, so what we had to do was we had to work with her, really talk with her. The family that she was talking with, they didn't know what to do with all these requests for kind of,
chores.
Yeah, for just it's like she wanted to sit in a chair with her feet up and be the queen, and she was not on bed rest, and she was not that far along. So definitely, if you're having trouble communicating, keep your adoption professional in the loop, because they can help you. They can act as an intermediary, and they can give you some tips based on experience. But you want to remember, if a birth mother has chosen you, she sees something in you that she thinks would be good for her child. She may even struggle to accept that herself. She may struggle to accept her situation. She may be hoping to break a cycle by choosing adoption. One of the biggest fears birth mothers have in adoption is a fear of being judged for choosing adoption. They also have a fear of being judged by you. They've seen your profile. They know you have it more together than they do. Trust me, most of them are not feeling, like they are worth much at all. So you really, you want to build her up. You don't want to pile on the judgment that's going on in her own mind. You also want to be respectful of each birth mother, each potential birth mother. and you want to communicate with her on your best behavior, even if she's hard to understand or difficult to deal with. You know, if you have any types of disagreements, I know, you know, disagreements can come up over the baby's name, over circumcision, over all kinds of things. If you have any disagreements like that, you want to involve your adoption professional. Um, Along that line, I think we have up there, you want to be mature and appropriate. Keeping in mind adoption it's a personal process. It's important you remember the context of your relationship. So again, just watch the humor, watch the language as you kind of get to know each other. You also
Right.
want
For
to,
example, because I was thinking be mature and appropriate, and then I remembered a story that happened. I'm not going to share the story, but let's just say one thing not to do is to get so comfortable with birth mom that you tell a joke that would be inappropriate outside of your own household, for example, or if children were around.
or
Yeah.
in that particular case, send a video that is, you know, it was not 100% inappropriate, but I think off color is probably a good description. It's probably not a video you'd watch with your pastor sitting next to you. We'll put it that way. And
Yeah.
yeah, the
That's a
family.
good rule of thumb, Heather. Conduct
Yeah,
yourselves as though your pastor were sitting next to you at all times. We'll all be
yeah.
good to go, right?
Right. I mean, it really is. If you have a, because even, well, what happened with that situation is the birth mother said, forget it, I don't want them anymore. You know, they thought they had a great relationship because they joked a little on the phone, and then they sent something like that. And
I just took it too far.
they did.
Yeah.
Was it inappropriate? Like I say, no, it wasn't inappropriate. I saw it. I actually thought it was funny. But again, I wouldn't watch it with my pastor there. So
And
it's
now we will play the video for you. No, I'm
no,
just kidding.
no, we won't. But you know, one other thing you want to be sure is you respect confidentiality. This is a big one. You do not want to share about intimate or sensitive details about your child's birth mother before adoption or after adoption. Keep in mind, you know, the people you're sharing this intimate, confidential information with are going to know it forever. And, you know, you may confide in your mother. Well, you know, the birth mother, she says she's a heroin user, and we just don't know. You go through and adopt. Every time the child misbehaves, your mother is going to think, and maybe half the time she's going to whisper, I'll bet it's that heroin exposure. You know, some things, some private things are meant to be kept private. And you don't ever want someone to overhear, so when your child's 12 years old and acting up, his 14-year-old cousin who's overheard stuff says, you're just weird because your mom used heroin. Don't you know that? I mean, private needs to stay private. Especially in this day and age of social media. We have seen families share things on social media that should not have been shared. They were personal enough details that it made the birth mother walk away. You know, and that's tragic. That is tragic when you have a birth mother who's chosen you. You overshare on social media and she says, you know what? No thanks, never mind. Especially if they go on and place that baby with someone else. Because here you did all this work. Your adoption professional did all this work, and you threw it away. So you really want to be
Yeah.
careful. You keep private situations private. Many families, we just worked with a family who they had a sudden situation. They flew across country to pick up their baby girl, and they did not post on social media that they were home with their baby, that they had adopted a baby girl until they were home. Everything was signed, sealed, irrevocable. That's when they shared. Now, some of their family members knew, but they didn't make a production on social media until they knew it was good. They were in the clear. It was done. And that's really important because this is something you can control. You can control your sharing, and you don't want to do anything that'll jeopardize your adoption. Um, Along that
And
line, oh, go ahead.
Well, with confidentiality, it's not only just things that are more sensitive in nature, but just your child's story. I know we recently had a webinar where an adoptive mom, she just kept some things private, even though they were good things, to share those with her child first as they were older, became older. And then that child could have the choice as to whether or not to share their story or how much of their story to share with others. That she just shared the very bare basics with everyone around them and kept even the positive details private, kind of like as a treasure trove for her child to open as
Mm-hmm.
they got older and decide who they want to share that with.
Mm-hmm. Right, exactly. You also want to avoid making it all about the baby. Um, yes, the ultimate outcome is you're parents of a baby, but until that baby is yours, you really need to be sure you're keeping a keeping this perspective that it's about the birth mom. It's about building that relationship. At the hospital, it's her birth plan. It's not your birth plan. And you don't want to pressure her into a certain type of delivery or prenatal care or breastfeeding or pain medication. Those are her decisions and should be her decisions. And keep in mind, the role the hospital plays is to keep your baby safe. If they don't offer you a room or they don't have room for you to have your own space, just go with it. The baby will be yours soon enough. Be as available as you can. Show up through the night for all of the feedings. That's your baby, just like it was your baby. But you need to not make a scene. And we've worked with families where the adoptive father has thrown a fit. We have hospitals we used to work with that will no longer, they will only do agency adoptions where we send a social worker in because they don't want to deal with adoptive parents because they've had such a bad experience with one or two. You want to be there in the way your child's birth mother needs. If she wants you to spend time together, enjoy the opportunity. If she needs space or doesn't want group photos, honor her comfort level. And and it's one of those things that you really want to be as flexible as you can and be realistic with your expectations, knowing that this is her time. Very soon it's going to be the rest of your lives with your child. She needs her time, not just to make and fulfill her adoption plan, but to say hello to the baby before she can say goodbye.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think the next thing we're going to talk about is your checklist. Just a quick review of a checklist of what's really important so you don't make mistakes in your adoption. The first and the foremost is your home study. Um, you want your home study to be valid before you travel to adopt. And let's talk just a minute, Kim, about what a valid home study is.
Mm-hmm.
Most states, well, all states require a home study that is appropriate for the type of adoption you're doing. So if you're open to adopting a sibling group, your home study has to say that you're approved for a sibling group or a single infant. Usually you can do both. So whatever you're pursuing, your home study has to include, it has to fit into your home study. Also, if you're doing a home study outside of your own state, it's important to know that even though your state may have
An
requirements,
adoption, an
I'm
adoption
sorry,
outside of your state. Yes.
I'm sorry, um, it, the other state may have a few different requirements. The biggest example is probably like the state of Arizona. You only need to update your home study every 18 months. But most other states require you updated every year or at a minimum have your background clearances updated within a year. So if you
Mm-hmm.
lived in Arizona, say and adopted from California, and your home study was over 12 months old, because of the California requirements, you would have to get your clearances updated. So you want to talk to your adoption professional about ensuring your home study is valid for the type of adoption you're pursuing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you want to be sure your profile and website are created, are live, are reflecting what your adoption professional advises. Because your adoption professional, that's who's working with the birth mothers. They should have a good handle on what birth mothers are looking for, and they should really guide you to build an honest, truthful profile of who you are in such a way that it also reflects many of the requests birth mothers have. You know,
Mhm.
one of the common requests is for a couple with no children. Well, you don't want to pack a profile full of pictures of you with kids if you don't have any. So those are the types of personal suggestions you should be getting from your adoption professional. And you want to do your best job. You know, we recommend families take pictures specifically for their profile. Don't just grab all the pictures from Christmas of your family opening presents together. You need to really know what birth mothers are looking for and show that in your profile. If you're already in the process of adopting and you have not put your best effort into your profile and website, I would tell you to go back and do it again. Otherwise, you may just be wasting time. This needs to be your best effort. And if your adoption professional has given you suggestions that you did not take, you may want to go back and revisit those and do it again, because, again, this is really the first thing, and it may be the only thing birth mothers have to learn about you. So you want to be sure it is top notch. Um, one of the things I recently saw actually on a Facebook posting was a family mentioning why it's taking so long to adopt. But they had not yet started their profile or website. You know, it until you get those things done, again, a birth mother can't learn about you. If she can't learn about you, she can't choose you.
Mhm.
Um,
Right. Make progress on that every day, because
yes,
you don't want to leave until tomorrow what you can do today. You want to get out there as quickly as you can. You don't want to compromise. You don't want to rush through it, but don't put it off.
right.
Hold yourself accountable. Allow your adoption professional to hold you accountable for that as
Hmm.
well in the progress.
Hmm.
And know that when they are reaching out to coach you along, henpeck you along, sheepdog herd you along, whatever the case may be, just know they're doing it out of care and concern for you, and that they want you to be successful.
Absolutely. And that's kind of one of those things. A lot of times I know on other webinars we talk about the challenge of adoption that's outside of your control. This is one of the biggest things that is within your control. You have complete control. Here at Lifetime we recommend that every family have an adoption video on their website. No compromise. That's what we recommend. Families that are getting picked, they have videos. We recently, you probably heard me say this if you attended one of our previous calls, we recently worked with a birth mom who was in the hospital. She had just delivered. She had a coordinator had taken her 4 profiles of families. She couldn't decide. So the coordinator, not really knowing, well, I don't know what else to tell you, show you. She said, well, you know what? Let's go online and see let's watch their videos. 2 of the 4 had videos. So she was easy to narrow it down to 2. And of those 2, the first one was not available, so then she picked the second one. The 2 families who didn't have videos, they weren't even considered after she saw the videos. That's how important video is. And so that's why at Lifetime we really want to put an emphasis on that, because that's what's really working.
And you
Um,
know what not to do? Don't let your personal insecurities stop you from doing a video. Just do it.
yes.
Just get out there and do it.
Yes, and that is, you know what, Kim, I'm glad you said that, because that's true across your adoption journey. You know what? Those personal insecurities, a lot of times people say, well, I'll feel better once I lose 10 pounds. I'll feel better about myself once I get a newer car. I'll feel better about myself. I'll feel like I belong in the mommy club once I have a baby. You know what? Those insecurities, if you drag them along with you, trust me, once you're in that mommy club, it'll be on something else. It always is there. It's best to learn how to let go of those things, and Joyce Myers says, do it afraid. You may feel inadequate, you may feel afraid, you may not like how you sound on video or how you talk on video, but you want to do it afraid. Again, you're always going to have, if you have those insecurities, deal with them, or you will always deal with them. in terms of they'll always be a part of you. So really, take this opportunity to realize, like with the profile, the website, and the video, those are things within your control. And if you are already waiting to adopt, those are things to, and you feel like you want to do something, you want to, these are areas you can work on. So let's move on here. Also on your checklist, every adoption requires legal assistance, usually in the form of an attorney, sometimes in the form of an agency, just to do that legal aspect of it. You don't want to try to complete an adoption without an attorney. A great example of this is a family we worked with many years ago who actually had gotten themselves into a very difficult situation with independent adoption. A woman contacted them. It was someone they knew, and they thought, she was kind of a friend type of thing. And they all decided, you know what, it would just be easiest, because they didn't yet have a home study, let's just put my husband, the birth mother suggested, put your husband's name on the birth certificate. Then, then it's easy. You, the wife, can adopt the baby, but it already looks like it's him. So that is what they did. And then the birth mother changed her mind and took the baby back, and that was all good and fine until he was served with an order for child support. So here they were trying to cut legal corners, avoid the cost of the attorney, avoid getting a home study right away, trying to, and he had to, they had to go to court and explain why he lied, filling out a form that said he voluntarily was saying the child was his, in order to get out of paying child. I mean, it was a mess. It was a legal mess. And it's one of those things that you don't ever want to go through adoption trying to cut corners. That's when you jeopardize your adoption. Absolutely.
Another aspect of making sure you have legal assistance could be in an adoption where you already knew the birth mom, maybe a kinship adoption, and she's not agreeing to sign any papers. It's very important. You may want to question her intentions and how stable will that child's life be if birth mom isn't really interested in a permanent adoption and voluntarily terminating her parental rights to ensure that you can make decisions for that child and that child can have stability with a set of parents who are going to be there with them throughout their childhood. Most birth moms we work with in our program, they want to know that this is going to be a legal adoption, that you will have all parental authority, and that they're voluntarily choosing adoption and terminating their parental rights. Most birth moms we work with want to be clear about that, but sometimes if a birth mom doesn't have a clear understanding about adoption and she's just looking for some help, it's a little too good to be true, and that can really be difficult when the years start to go by and she comes back and wants that child back or wants to have parental authority and you only have custody.
Right.
So just make sure you do have that legal work in place and that you're using someone qualified. We provide referrals to adoptive parents once they have the match in place. We don't provide the referral ahead of time because every state's law is different, which means Uncle Fred may not be qualified to even do the adoption when it comes down to it.
And unless Uncle Fred is an adoption attorney, he's not qualified.
Right.
Adoption law is a specialized area of practice. Just like you're not going to go to a brain surgeon, to take care of a hemorrhoid. It's not what you would do. So you want to be sure you're going to the right professional. And along that line, your attorney will be able to let you know when you can leave the state if you're out of state, because it's very important that you don't leave a state prematurely before getting clearance. That can jeopardize your adoption. That is the one thing alone that can jeopardize your adoption. We had a family that did this a number of years ago, and it was a special needs adoption, very, very medically fragile baby. And they left California and went back home somewhere in the Midwest before they had clearance because they wanted the baby to get in with the specialist. And the state of California got wind of that, and they said, you need to come back. The family said, we're not. The state of California sent a worker back there, and the baby came back, and the adoption completely fell apart. The attorney was reprimanded, even though it wasn't him. It was the family's decision. So it's very, very important that you don't leave the state prior to having your attorney's consent from ICPC approval. Also, don't ever give money or help to a birth mother without consulting your attorney. That's
Mm-hmm.
very, very important.
And I think a lot of these things fall under the category of you don't know what you don't know.
Right. Absolutely.
How could you know?
Right.
Yeah. And then here you are making a mistake that jeopardizes your adoption. Consult with your adoption professional. Consult with your adoption attorney. Make sure you follow their instructions to the T because they're the ones that do know.
Right. Your adoption budget, you want to have funds set aside or available for all your adoption needs, not just while you wait, but while you wait for clearance to go back home. You want to, during your time of waiting, keep building your budget if you can. Try to cut back and set that money aside. Keep in mind if you're chosen by a birth mother who's not in your state, you're going to need to plan to stay there. Average is about 2 weeks. We have a lot of tips to help you cut the costs and plan for that, but you need to plan to be out of state for, anywhere from, well, I'm just going to say the average is 2 weeks. So you have to be sure you have budget and resources for that. Also, by building your budget, it's going to help you if you encounter a birth mother who may need a little more help. A great example is because of the rules in Obamacare, a lot more women have insurance, but if you have insurance that's not Medicaid, you have a pretty good copay on a pregnancy. So more women today we're seeing need medical help because they may work, not qualify for Medicaid, so they have Obamacare, and they may have a higher cost of their delivery.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to keep building your budget as you can. You want to be sure that you don't wait until a match is needing more money than, if you've gotten halfway in and you thought, you know what, I can pay for half of what is needed and I'll figure the rest out. That's not a good way to go. You may not have all the cash in the bank, but if you've got a credit card with a good limit on it, you have the resources. Don't ever accept a match you can't afford. And you don't ever want to, trade your future for your present. You really want to be sure that the adoption you're agreeing to can fit into your budget. Does that make sense, Kim?
Absolutely.
Right. And a good
We
tip.
have people chiming in saying everyone should be listening to this webinar.
And remember, not all attorneys take credit cards. That's a great reminder because it is true. What's one of the tips we give is if you have a credit card with points, use it. Pay it off every month as you can. Build those points, and then maybe you can use them on travel or for baby needs in the future. But yes, not everyone takes credit card these days or PayPal. So you just want to be sure you have the finances for that. And one of the ways you could control that, because I see a few questions coming in about that, a lot of the affordability of a match is set within your adoption preferences for how much expenses you're open to considering. Before families come to Lifetime, they have a phone conference where they review with a coordinator the costs, the anticipated average costs of attorneys. And so they should be prepared for that before starting the program. And then they set a preference in terms of how much birth mother expense they're open to. So that's where, if you build your budget, maybe you can go from open to $1,000 to open to $3,000. If you can't afford that, then stay down at $1,000, because we also at Lifetime don't want to present you with an opportunity that's outside of your budget. I mean, the bottom line is that's why we ask, what's your budget for expenses, so we can present you to birth mothers who are going to fit inside of your budget. Now, if you've had a catastrophe in your life, say your husband got laid off, say the wife got laid off, whatever, and all of a sudden you find your resources have really dwindled down to the fact that you don't even think you can afford the travel and the legal cost. You may want to talk to your coordinator, because it may be a good idea to go on hold for a time until you can build your resources back up, because you never want to pass on a situation that you can't. I mean, like I say, we don't like even presenting you with situations unless we know they fit into your budget. But if you feel as though your resources have gone below the minimum you would need to complete an adoption, just in terms of legal and travel, you need to talk to your coordinator about going on hold.
So two things what not to do. Two things not to do about with your adoption budget. Do not be in denial about the real cost. And do not stop saving. You know, accept and acknowledge and plan for and prepare for the financial aspect of your adoption so that you can say yes when that birth mom has chosen you, and hopefully the financial piece will be addressed, or you'll have a backup plan if the adoption happens sooner than you thought.
Absolutely. So let's see. I think the next thing we're going to talk about is your adoption professional and your preferences. It's really important throughout this that you keep your adoption professional updated at all times. If your status changes, like you have a baby, you adopt a baby, your parents move in with you, those are things you want to keep your adoption professional updated with. They'll be able to help you talk about the options and move to the next step for your family. You also want to be sure that you've communicated your adoption goals and your openness honestly and clearly. It has to do a lot with your preferences in adoption. When you hear us talk about preferences, we're talking about the race of the baby you're open to, the age, what type of substance exposure you're open to, your budget, and then any other items, like are you open if a woman has a history of mental illness? Would you be open to mild special needs? Maybe you're open to major special needs. You know, those are things that are good to be upfront, be very clear, because that's how we're presenting you to birth mothers within those preferences. So you don't want to be open to everything, or oh, we'll consider all, when you really won't consider all. I remember, gosh, well, this happens a few times a year. We have a family that says we're open to any race. And many times that's a category we look at when we get maybe racial combinations that are not in your typical 8 combinations that we routinely see. So we call them with a race, and oh, well, we're open to anything but not that. You can't be open to anything but not, I mean, anything is anything. I understand that a lot of other categories, anything may have, but when we're talking about race, anything is anything. So, and sometimes families in the past have done that, so they think they can have more situations to consider. But it doesn't work that way. We present you, because when we have to go back to a birth mother and say, you know what, Joe and Sally, they're not available, so, who's your next choice? That hurts her. Even if Joe and Sally went on hold because they're pregnant, it's still, she considered Joe and Sally, and she made that decision. Okay, I looked at all these people, and that's the one. That's who I want. And then we have to say, well, can you do all that again? Because that's not going to work. So it puts them in kind of a tough spot. So you want to be sure that your preferences are what you will say yes to. I know, Kim, recently we had another one who, they were open, I think, up to a year old, and they had not been with us very long, and they were chosen by a woman who had a 7 or 8 month old. And we presented it to them, and the answer was, well, that's not our first choice. Well, we don't do first, second, and third choices. We do, what are you open to saying yes to? And any adoption professional, especially your home study provider who's writing your home study, needs to know what you're open to saying yes to. And that's really important, because you want to choose an adoption professional that understands what you're looking for and can help you complete the adoption that you hope for, while meeting your needs and the needs of the birth mother as well. So, it's really important that when you're working with Lifetime, you're able to make use of the referrals we provide for legal, for home study, and any other assistance that you need to complete your adoption, because that's one of the key things that you want to be working with, is people who understand what you're looking for. Because when that's kind of a moving target, you can't make anyone, it's kind of like, you have a friend come over and she says, you know what, I'm really hungry. Do you have anything to eat? You offer, well, sure, I've got a whole fridge of food. What would you like? Well, I don't care anything. So you make her a turkey sandwich. Oh, no, anything but that. Do you have anything else? So you whip up a pan of brownies. Put a brownie. No, no, that doesn't sound good either. What else do you have? You know, we're talking
It
about
sounds
things
like
that,
she doesn't really know what she wants.
exactly. And when you don't know what you want, how are you going to know when you find it?
Mm-hmm.
So you
Yeah.
may need to, if you're married, take some time talking. Well, come up with random scenarios. Play the what if game. What if a woman who was Asian and the boyfriend was African American? Would we say yes to that? What if the birth mother used, heroin just a little bit and then not at all? And if you don't know the answer, go do some research. Do some research about the
Mm-hmm.
effects. And one of the things I know, Kim, that you talk to families a lot about is you'll hear, well, we're not open to a birth mother who smokes because we're a non-smoking home. Well, the
Mm-hmm.
baby doesn't come out with a pack of cigarettes. The baby And the baby is also coming from a non-smoking womb because there's no smoke in there. It's airtight. So it's one of those things. If you read about the effects of cigarettes on an unborn baby, you know it's pretty minor. And then most families are like, oh, well, of course, we didn't think about it that way. We were thinking about it from our perspective. We're a non-smoking home, so we don't want a smoker in our house. Well, that kind of gets us back to what we talked about earlier. You're not adopting the birth mom. You're adopting her baby. So
Mm-hmm.
again, just kind of things to keep in mind, when you're looking at that, because we want to present you with a situation that you excitedly say yes to, and that's our goal. Um,
Mm-hmm.
our staff today had 3 new matches today, and they're excited. This is, you know, if you could spend a day with our team, you'll know they will talk and talk. They will tell you stories, because they love doing this. This is a passion. They love working with families. They love working with birth moms, and they are so excited when they call you and say, you know what, Joe? You know what, Sally? I've got a birth mom that's interested in you, and I want to tell you about her in hopes that you're open to talking with her tonight. Um, and I'll tell you, it's a real morale killer when you hear from Joe and Sally who, oh, oh, well, Sally's 8 months pregnant, and we just didn't want to tell you. It's like, well, that's not really, it is really, it's a difficult thing. So
Mm-hmm.
in this, with your professional, you want to be honest all the way through your adoption. It's one of those things that, you need to be honest. In the last year, we had an adoption happen where a adoptive mom showed up to the hospital and she was very pregnant and didn't tell us. The birth mother called us and said, why didn't you tell us? Tell me that the adoptive mom was pregnant. Well, guess what? We didn't know. And it did not go real well. So, honesty is really, really fits into this. Keep in touch with your adoption professional. You want to stay in touch. If you're matched, you want to stay in touch. We've heard from families that they say, well, we're talking to birth mom, everything's good, we'll call you when we need you. You know what? That's okay, but it's also a really good practice to check in with your coordinator anytime. Check in with them once a month. It's just a good practice to get into. And you're not checking on them to say, hey, is there anything new? Because if there's something new, you should hear from them if you're working with Lifetime. but it's just a good practice because you know, okay, I'm doing this. This is good for my adoption. If all your other boxes are checked off, you've done your video, you've done everything. You know what? Then you know you are doing everything you can. One of the other big ones we have here real quick is when families move and they forget to tell their adoption coordinator.
Mm-hmm.
Not just during the wait, but after the adoption. You know, it's really important, you know, we have a lot of your records here too. And if a birth mother or a member of the birth mother's family shares some information, like medical information with us, because she can't reach you, well, if we can't reach you either, there may be important information you don't have. So always, you know, keep your professional updated as well with your address.
I think a lot of this communication and keeping in touch and being honest with us about what's really going on in your lives, that has to do with assumptions, assuming whether or not it even matters to us. We'd rather you err on the side of informing us too much. TMI is better than not enough information.
Right.
Too much information is always better for us rather than you moved and we didn't know, you got pregnant and we didn't know, and here we
Right.
are trying to walk down a path of an adoption with a birth mom for you, and we didn't have enough information to really make a good adoption plan for her and thus for you.
Right. Absolutely. So those are all, you know, good reminders, you know,
Mm-hmm.
not saying that you all don't know these things, but again, it's just and it's sharing some of the, like I said, everything we're sharing tonight are things we've experienced. So you want to be
Mm-hmm.
really clear. Um, so I think kind of the last section we're going to talk about, last kind of main topic we're going to talk about is, you know, saying yes. That is such a big thing in adoption, and honestly, sometimes it's a challenge. Sometimes it's a real challenge for families to accept a match. You have to understand in adoption that you're never going to have all of your questions answered. You know, at Lifetime we do our very best to get you every piece of information we can, but the reality of it is it isn't always all available. For instance, if a birth mother refuses to go to the doctor, we can't get medical records. Now and then we have a family that insists on birth father medical records. There usually are none. You know, we have a health history form, but usually there are no I mean, birth fathers, 20, 25 years old, most 20, 25-year-old men don't go to the doctor. Whether they're in these situations or whether, you know, they're sitting on your couch next to you and they're your husband. Unless Unless an employer requires a physical or you're pursuing fertility treatments, most men don't go and have physicals in this age range. It just
Mm-hmm.
isn't how it's done.
That's
Um,
very true.
right. Uh, you know, also having expectations for a birth mother that perhaps the one that picked you doesn't meet. For instance, we were hoping for a teenage mom that was going to college, not a woman who's already raising 3 kids and obviously has a history with CPS. Well, okay, but the babies both come out newborn. I mean, your birth mother's choices are not going to be reflective on the outcome of her pregnancy. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and a teen, you know, we can help you within your preferences. We can help you again with race, age, substance exposure, contact after, budget. We don't have any preference for we want a teenager instead of someone that's, you know, 21 and older. We don't have those check boxes to fill out. We don't have a checkbox that says no homeless women. Because those are things that are unrealistic. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's if you're going to get that specific, then you may need to consider international adoption, or maybe even adoption from the foster system, where you're going to have a lot more information and control on the child that you get. Many years ago, I know Marty was working with a family who turned down a match because they didn't like the shape of the mother's nose. Now, she dug deeper with this family and found out there were actually a lot more issues underlying this. Bottom line was the adoptive mom was just realizing that She wanted to be pregnant, but she was picking out a physical trait so she could kind of justify saying no. Sometimes families who might be open to African American mixed with Caucasian, they may want to see a picture of the father and the birth mother and the birth father so they can kind of judge if the family might fit into the skin color in their family. Again, that's not within your control or our control. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that's not a, a reason to say no. Recently we
And
had a,
selecting certain races does not mean you have a certain physical appearance,
absolutely, that's
especially
very,
within Caucasian.
yeah,
How many
that's
people call
right,
themselves Caucasian and they have totally different skin tone, totally different hair color, eye color, face shape, height, weight, everything. So anyway,
right.
go on, Heather.
And and recently we had a family say, well, can we not give an answer on this one to see if something better comes along before the due date? No,
Eek.
no, absolutely not. Um, you need to accept, you're not, again, you're not adopting the birth mother. You're adopting her
Mm-hmm.
baby. And you're evaluating the information we've received and we've passed on to you. And it's just very important. That's why we talk about preferences a lot. It's very important if that you're honest in your preferences and that you're not going to turn someone down for something that's within those preferences, because when you turn it down, again, I talked about this a minute ago, it makes it very difficult for her to continue her adoption plan with another family because she picked you. She had her heart set on you. Even though we encourage them to pick more than one, because sometimes families get matched quickly and are chosen quickly, that's what we share with the birth mother, we need to, it's really hard because every now and then we have birth mothers that say, no, there's this one, they're perfect. They're the only ones that's perfect. And then to have to go backwards and say, well, I know you think they're perfect. And of course, we're never going to tell her, they don't think you're perfect. But that's the reality. So,
Mm-hmm.
you have to come in this with an open heart. And you have to, you know, I know we like to say a lot, you have to be prayed up. That we need 2 days to pray about this situation. No, you don't have that. You do your preparation ahead of time. So when you're presented with a situation, you'll have a reasonable amount of time to say yes, if it's a sudden situation, yes, and we're on our way. Or if it's a match situation, yes, we're happy to talk to her tonight. Um, but really, it should be pretty uncommon that a family ever says no to a match that is within their preferences.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I know we're just past 5, so I want to get all this information in there. So one of the other things, like I say, we want to say yes as soon as possible. You want to be ready and excited. You want to travel when your professional advises. Don't wait to travel for your baby. And you need to be smart about driving or flying. Yeah, you may save a little money driving, but if it jeopardizes your adoption because you're driving halfway across the country and you can't get there for 3 days, you know what? Paying the money now is a lot less cost than losing an adoption because you're not there. Your car breaks down, somebody starts throwing up and you have to pull over for a day while the 24-hour flu passes. Any of those things can happen. And a birth mother in the hospital being discharged, a baby being left there with no parents, that does not make for a good adoption. I tell people, if you're more than about 5 or 6 hours, fly every time. There's no good reason to drive. If you're self-employed and you can take off and spend the month before her due date with her, okay, that's okay to drive. But you're always, always going to be better off flying. And trust me, when it's time to drive back home, you're going to be so much happier you flew. Driving with a newborn is not easy. Babies do not like being restrained in a car seat for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. You think, oh yeah, we'll drive straight through. We'll be there in 48 hours. No, you won't. Maybe you got there that way. Going home with a baby, it's not. And when you're in a car and that baby's crying and there's nothing you can do, that's torture. So
Mm-hmm.
be wise about that. Have a plan now, today. If you haven't done this, do this now. have a plan on how you're going to manage your pets, and if you already have kids, have a plan. So if you got a call today, if I called you tonight and said, you know what, I have a situation, you need to get on a plane and be there by morning, you could do that. You wouldn't have to wait until the kennel opens tomorrow. You have a neighbor who's willing to take your dog and put him in the kennel the next day. You have a grandma who's an hour away, but she's near the airport, so you can drop the kids off there on the way to the airport. You have a plan. So you know what you can do if that happens. Again, you don't want to jeopardize an adoption because you don't have a plan. Again, I talked briefly about don't wait to say yes. You need to
Heather,
decide. Yes.
question.
Yes.
This is a question from our listeners. Is it acceptable if only one parent can get off work?
It's acceptable, yes. You want the birth mother to know ahead of time. I'm going to say it's not advisable. These are the first days of your child's life. And if, say, the mother was biologically giving birth, would dad not take time off work? I mean, of course he would, or you'd hope he would. These are the
But
days.
prepare for this. Prepare for this ahead of time.
Right.
Yes.
Let your employer know. Save up your vacation. This is something you can plan and prepare for. And federal law now protects this. So learn a little about it, research about this leave. You should not ever lose your job. I know sometimes self-employed people, it's a little tough because days not working often means days not having income. Build your budget. Figure out how you can, spend a little time doing the work you have to do remotely. I realize if you're a plumber or electrician, you don't really have a lot of options for those days. But there's going to be times in the future where you want to go to those Little League games. This is as important as being there. Your child only has his first days once, and you want to have ample opportunity to bond with that child. So here's a good solution if parents feel a little tight on that. One parent can go ahead of time or, around the due date. Then when the baby's born, dad can fly in. Dad can spend 3, 4, 5 days, hopefully maybe even a week. And while they're still waiting for clearance, dad can fly back home and get back to work. But at least he's been there. He's been there to meet the birth parents because oftentimes they want to meet you in person. They picked you. You accepted them. The baby's why you came together, but it can't be all about the baby. That's so important. It can't be all about the baby. So you need to make time. This is a priority. And you don't ever want someone to think, well, he didn't show up. Obviously, he doesn't care that much about being a dad. Because that's what the birth parents will think, and if that causes them to change their mind, then those few days you wouldn't take off work were pretty darn expensive.
I would say the only exception is if you're on military duty, on a deployment, you can't get out of it, and you are property of the government. You don't really have a say over that.
Kim, the thing about that is a birth mother has chosen you knowing that because that's what we put in profiles. So when you're getting to know her, it's only going to be mom talking probably, or maybe dad can Skype in or something, but that's something you'd say, we're so excited, we do want you to know that Joe is currently, he's overseas, but I'll be there, and then if you want to meet him maybe in a few months when the baby's a few months old, we can plan a trip back down to meet you, and you can visit with the baby then too. I mean, it's, again, you want to be sure
it works.
Yeah. So you definitely want to say yes as quickly as you can. Timely communication is really important. You don't want to play games with returning calls or emails to your child's birth mother or to your adoption professional. We've had people tell us, well, we thought if we, answered her text right away, she'd always expect us to be right there, and we don't want to be right there after the baby's born. Well, that's not how you set expectations and boundaries. That's avoiding an honest conversation about that. we've heard from people, you know, yeah, we heard we shouldn't accept the first match we were offered. Well, I don't know where you heard that, but that's terrible advice. Because if one birth mom only ever chooses you, and you chose to say no because you thought a better one might come along, guess what? God had a plan, and you said no, thank you. We want to keep seeing, you know, we want to see if something better is coming down the pike. Yeah, no, don't do that. Um, or
Mhm.
we actually have, oh, this was an awful, awful situation. We had a sudden situation that this birth mother chose the family, but she didn't call us until about 6 hours before she was being discharged. I got your packet. I never sent it back. I want to do adoption. This is the couple I want. For 6 hours nonstop, we called the couple. We called their emergency numbers. We called and called and called and called. I'm sorry, it wasn't for 6 hours. It was 5. Because at the end of the 5th hour, we called the birth mom and said, you know what, I know you're being discharged soon. We've got everything set up with the hospital, and we're calling your second choice family, or we just talked to your second choice family. They're on the way. If you want to stay at the hospital a couple more hours, they will be there. Well, let me tell you, when that first choice family called us back, they told us, you know, I didn't want to worry about my adoption today, so I turned my cell phone off. Well, they missed their adoption because they turned their cell phone off. Granted, this was a few years ago before we were all quite so connected to our cell phones, but we called home phones. We called, like I say, their family was frantically trying to find them. And when they
Mhm.
finally were found, they were heartbroken. I mean, we couldn't wait any longer. We waited as long as we could and tried as hard as we could, but we just couldn't get them. And they missed out on adopting that baby. And so you have to have be available for timely communication. In this day and
Mhm.
age, it's awesome because, you know, if you're in a meeting and can't take a call, you know, if you have visual voicemail, you can usually read what the caller left the message as. You know, we can get our email on our phones. We're connected enough that you would think communication wouldn't be a problem still, but believe it or not, it is. In fact, about 6 months ago, this story has a happy ending, by the way, but we had a similar situation. A family was going on vacation, just a quick little like 5-day getaway, and they hadn't told us. And they were flying, and it was about a 3-hour flight. And we called for 3 hours. Finally, we reached an emergency contact who was probably great granny, who they were actually going to see. So she was able to kind of we were able to piece together the story. So, okay, they're on the plane. She knew about the time they were landing, so we kind of had an end time. And I'll tell you what, as soon as they turned those phones back on, they were both calling us at the same time because they wanted to be sure they didn't miss something. Again, it
Oh.
had a happy ending. They adopted. But what they failed to do was give us a heads up they were going to be traveling, because at
Mhm.
least we would have known. It would have been a little easier on our staff, and we could have set expectations for the birth mother a little better. But it was a happy ending because never left the airport. They got back on the next plane and flew to where birth mom was. Great granny never got to
Perfect.
see him. Yeah,
Oh. Well, that's too bad, but I'm sure she was happy for them.
exactly. Um, and you know, the last point we're going to talk about is just don't put off starting your adoption. If you haven't started your adoption yet, you know what? Don't put it off. Whether you're
Mhm.
doing it independently, whether you're working with Lifetime, you know, you don't want to put off starting, because every day you put off starting is a day that you may not have with your child. We hear so often from families. In fact, recently I talked to a family that talked about their 20-year journey to adopt, and I'm like, wait, you've only been with us 1 year. Where's the, well, you know, I understand they've been trying to have a baby for 20 years. Well, you know, you've only been actively trying to adopt for 1 year, but that's a whole nother subject of, you know, this is a
Mhm.
different journey. But you know, don't put up, because one of the saddest things is when we hear families say, oh, I wish I would have started years before. You know, you don't want to overanalyze everything so much that it results in paralysis. Don't get overwhelmed. Ask questions, be honest about what you want, and move forward with, you know, with the right help and the professional that fits your needs.
Mhm. Absolutely. Well, thank you, Heather, for sharing so many great tips and stories. The hour, more than an hour, flew by. Thank you for staying with us a little extra time tonight and packing it all in for us, and we really appreciate that. And to you, our listeners tonight, thank you for spending this time and for staying around till the end. The majority of you have been able to stay till the end, and we really appreciate you taking that time to, open your minds and hearts to the information we have to share with you. Along the same sentiments of Heather sharing, do not put your adoption off, there are things that we can help you do. The very first thing to do is to fill out your application online, lifetimeadoption.com/apply. That would be a very easy and free thing you can do. Actually, right now, all you have to do is go to the website, lifetimeadoption.com/apply. You can start asking questions. Just email us, adopt@lifetimeadoption.com, or give us a call, 1-800-923-6784. And join us on Facebook as well so that you can have that support around you and see these tips and the little pieces of encouragement and the happy stories that are happening every day at facebook.com/open.adoption. Join us on there and be a part of the group. And we thank you all for joining us. And Heather, thank you so much for everything you've shared with us tonight. And Libby, thank you for the frantic typing you've been doing in the background, answering all the questions. You have been doing a great job behind the scenes. So thank you all, and we look forward to seeing you on our next webinar. Stay tuned to your email for your next invitation.